Everything your history book told you was a lie. They showed you pictures of Roman emperors who looked serious and powerful. And yeah, they were. But they left out the most insane, scandalous, and craziest parts of their lives. They told you about their battles, but not what they did in the bedroom. They taught you about their laws, but not their secret loves. What if I told you the most powerful men in the world had relationships with other men, and sometimes it was no big deal? Today we are exposing the Roman emperors they don't want you to know about. This is the history lesson they were too scared to teach you. Okay, before we get to the wild stories, you need to understand one simple rule about ancient Rome. Our words don't work in their world. They didn't have words for gay or straight. Their entire world was based on one thing: power. In Rome, it was all about who was on top. A Roman man's number one mission was to be dominant. It was his manliness, his courage, his whole identity. So, for a Roman guy, the gender of his partner was less important than his role in the bedroom. He could be with men or women, and nobody cared, as long as he was the active, dominant one. The absolute worst thing you could be was the passive partner. To be penetrated meant you were weak, you were feminine, you were conquered. It could literally ruin your life. So, when we talk about these emperors, we're not talking about modern identities. We're talking about a world where an emperor could have his entire career destroyed by one rumor that he was another man's queen. And that's exactly where our first insane story begins, with the most famous Roman of all time. You all know Julius Caesar. The guy was a legend, a genius, a total beast. Your textbooks told you he conquered countries and crossed rivers, but I bet they didn't tell you his secret nickname, the Queen of Bithynia. The story is, when Caesar was a young man, he was sent to meet with a king named Nicomedes. But he stayed for so long that crazy rumors started spreading back in Rome. People whispered that Caesar got what he wanted from the king by being his lover, specifically by taking the passive role. For Caesar's enemies, this was like finding $1 billion. They used this rumor to attack him for the rest of his life. One of his rivals literally called him every woman's husband and every man's wife in front of the entire Senate. This was so damaging that even his own soldiers chanted a song making fun of him during his victory parade. They sang, "Caesar conquered the Gauls, but Nicomedes conquered Caesar." The insult was devastating. Caesar denied it forever, but we'll never know the full truth. The craziest part is that this was his enemy's ultimate weapon. They didn't care if he was with a man. They cared that he might have been the one who was conquered. If you thought Caesar's story was wild, you have no idea what's coming next. Emperor Nero took things to a completely different level. This guy didn't just have relationships with men, he married them. Twice. First, he married a man named Pythagoras. And in a move that shocked everyone, Nero played the part of the bride. He wore a bridal veil, had a massive public wedding, everything. The most powerful man on earth was publicly acting like a bride. It blew people's minds. But he wasn't done. After his second wife died, Nero found a young slave boy, Sporus, who looked exactly like her. And what he did next is one of the most insane things an emperor has ever done. Nero ordered Sporus to be castrated, and then he married him. This was not a secret. He dressed Sporus up like an empress, called him his wife, and took him on tours, kissing him in front of everyone. Sporus was his new empress. Why did he do this? Was he a madman? A genius trying to defy his enemies? Whatever the reason, Nero's public marriages to men were a direct attack on everything Rome believed in, and it cemented his legacy as one of the craziest tyrants of all time. Okay, not all of these stories are about pure scandal. This next one is one of the most epic and tragic love stories in all of history. The relationship between Emperor Hadrian and a young man named Antinous. Hadrian was a brilliant emperor, but his marriage to his wife was miserable. The real love of his life, his true passion, was Antinous. Antinous was known for being incredibly handsome and smart, and he was Hadrian's constant companion. And by all accounts, this was real, deep love. They hunted together, they traveled the world together, and Hadrian was openly obsessed with him. For Romans, an emperor having a young male lover wasn't that weird. The real scandal was that Hadrian was genuinely deeply in love, and he didn't care who knew it. Then, tragedy struck. Antinous drowned in the Nile River. Hadrian's reaction was unbelievable. He was completely destroyed. He cried uncontrollably, which was shocking for a Roman emperor. But his grief didn't stop there. He used his incredible power to make his lost love immortal. He declared Antinous a god. He built an entire city and named it Antinoopolis. He ordered so many statues of Antinous that today more statues of him survive than almost any other figure from the ancient world. This wasn't just an emperor honoring a friend. This was a man using the full power of an empire to make sure the world never forgot the man he loved. I have saved the most shocking, most mind-blowing story for last. This emperor completely breaks history. Elagabalus ruled for just 4 years as a teenager, but in that time, she is now seen by some historians as the queerest and possibly first ever trans figure in Roman history. Elagabalus came to power at just 14 and immediately shattered every Roman rule. According to a historian who was alive at the time, Elagabalus wore makeup, wigs, and women's clothing. She demanded that people call her lady and queen, not lord. The historian even claims she prostituted herself inside the palace. She had 5 wives, which was already a scandal, but she also married a man, a chariot driver named Heracles. And in this marriage, Elagabalus was proudly the wife and loved being called his queen. But here is the most unbelievable part. An ancient historian wrote that Elagabalus offered huge amounts of money to any doctor who could perform surgery to give her female genitalia. This is more than just cross-dressing. It sounds like she wanted to align her body with her identity, something we would recognize today as being transgender. Because of this, some museums now use she, her pronouns for Elagabalus. Now, we have to be careful because the historian who wrote this hated her. But the level of detail he used suggests there was something truly different about her. She didn't just challenge who an emperor could sleep with. She challenged the very definition of what an emperor, and a man, even was. So you're probably thinking, these are just 4 crazy examples, right? Wrong. The list of Roman rulers with same-sex relationships is incredibly long. Emperors like Trajan, Galba, Titus, Domitian, Commodus. The list goes on and on and on. The stories were so common that one famous historian, Edward Gibbon, joked that of the first 15 emperors, only one of them, Claudius, seemed to exclusively like women. Just one. Now, a lot of this comes from biased sources, but it proves one thing. What your history class treats as a weird, rare exception was actually much, much closer to the norm. So, if this was so common, why is it treated like a secret? Why didn't they teach you any of this in school? Well, there are a few huge reasons. First, the ancient historians themselves were often haters. They used accusations of weird sex stuff as a political weapon to trash emperors they didn't like. Second, the rise of Christianity changed everything. As the new faith took over, the old Roman world was completely rewritten. Christian writers had every reason to erase or condemn what they saw as the sinful lives of the earlier emperors. So, they scrubbed it from the history books. And finally, for hundreds of years, modern historians just ignored these stories. They either didn't believe them or thought they were too uncomfortable for a classroom. They flattened the messy, insane, and interesting truth into something boring. The stories of these emperors reveal a world that is so much crazier and more interesting than the version we got in school. It was a world where sexuality was about power, not labels. It was a world that gave us insane rumors against Caesar, scandalous marriages from Nero, the epic love story of Hadrian and Antinous, and the radical gender identity of Elagabalus. These stories have been hidden, not because they're unimportant, but because they're complicated. They challenge our ideas. They challenge the boring image of the Roman Empire. And they challenge us to accept a history that is more honest and way more human. By uncovering these stories, we are literally reclaiming a piece of history that was almost erased forever. If you believe history should be this interesting, then slam that like button and subscribe right now for more hidden history. Let us know in the comments which emperor's story absolutely blew your mind. We're just getting started exposing history's biggest secrets. Thanks for watching.